The US has the biggest air force on the planet, but what if that doesn't matter anymore? China is pumping out stealth fighters at a pace that could flip the balance faster than anyone expected. That isn't just a numbers game, it's a race for control of the skies, and the gap is closing right now. So if a real conflict breaks out, who actually wins? The answer is not what you think, and it could change everything. In 2026, the raw numbers suggest the global fighter jet balance is pretty straightforward. The United States is still comfortably at the top, with more than 2,700 combat aircraft across its military branches. China comes next, followed by Russia, and then a group of regional powers like India, Japan, and South Korea. On paper, it looks like a simple ranking, but that surface-level view misses the real story. The actual competition, especially between the United States and China, is not just about how many jets each side has. It is about how those jets are built, how they are used, how quickly they can be deployed, and how well they work together as part of a larger system. Once we dig into those layers, the comparison becomes much more interesting and complicated. Let's start with the United States, because it still sets the benchmark for modern air power. The US doesn't just have a big air force. It actually operates three separate air arms that function almost like independent air forces: the Air Force, the Navy, and the Marine Corps. Each one has its own aircraft, its own mission, and its own way of fighting. The Air Force focuses on global reach and air dominance. It is designed to project power anywhere in the world, often at very short notice. The Navy brings something completely different: aircraft carriers. These floating airbases allow the US to position fighter jets close to conflict zones without relying on foreign bases. Then the Marine Corps adds flexibility, with aircraft that can operate in rough, forward environments and support troops on the ground. What makes this setup powerful is not just the number of jets, but how these three branches are connected. They are tied together through a network-centric system where information flows constantly between aircraft, satellites, drones, and command centers. In this system, a fighter jet is not just a weapon, it is also a sensor and a communication node. Take the F-35, for example. It is often described as a stealth fighter, but that is only part of the story. Its real strength is its ability to gather and share data. An F-35 can detect enemy targets, pass that information to other aircraft, and coordinate attacks without firing a single shot. Older aircraft like the F-16 can then act on that information, effectively extending their usefulness. It creates a kind of layered force. You have advanced stealth aircraft at the front, supported by large numbers of older but still capable jets, all connected through a shared network. The result is not just a large fleet, but a highly integrated one that can operate across multiple regions at the same time. Now compare that to China, which has gone through one of the fastest military aviation transformations in modern history. 2 decades ago, China's Air Force relied heavily on designs based on older Soviet technology. Today, it is producing its own advanced fighters at scale. The centerpiece of China's modern fleet is the J-20 stealth fighter. China has fielded more than 200 of these aircraft, making it the second-largest fifth-generation fighter force in the world. That alone is a huge shift, considering that stealth technology used to be dominated almost entirely by the United States. But China's strategy is not just about building a few high-end jets. It is about scale and speed. Reports suggest that China is producing new fighters at a much faster rate than most other countries. In a single year, it can add hundreds of new aircraft, including both 4th-generation and 5th-generation models. A growing domestic aerospace industry backs this rapid production. One of China's earlier weaknesses was its reliance on foreign engines, particularly from Russia. That gap is gradually closing as China develops its own engines, enabling it to scale production without relying on external suppliers. Another key difference is China's expansion of its naval aviation. The United States has decades of experience operating carrier-based aircraft, but China is catching up quickly. With newer carriers like the Fujian entering service, China is building an air capability that extends beyond its land borders. Several days ago, China hinted that its 4th carrier will be nuclear-driven, making the Chinese Navy a blue water fleet. Notably, carrier-based fighters like the J-15 are already in use, and newer stealth designs like the J-35 are expected to play a bigger role in the future. It signals a shift in China's strategy, from a primarily land-based defensive posture to a more outward-looking force capable of projecting power at sea. So if we compare the two countries directly, the United States still has the advantage in overall scale, global reach, and operational experience. But China is closing the gap in some very specific areas, especially production speed and regional concentration of forces. And that brings up a really important point. Not all aircraft are equal, and not all fleets are designed for the same purpose. The United States is built for global operations. It needs to maintain air superiority across multiple regions simultaneously: Europe, the Middle East, and the so-called Indo-Pacific. That requires long supply chains, overseas bases, and a massive support system that includes refueling aircraft, surveillance platforms, and logistics networks. China, on the other hand, is more regionally focused. Its primary concern is its immediate neighborhood, especially areas like the South China Sea and the Taiwan Strait. Because of this, it can concentrate its forces closer to home, reducing the strain on logistics and allowing for faster response times. In a hypothetical scenario near China's borders, this geographic advantage could be significant. Even if the US has more aircraft overall, China might be able to bring a higher percentage of its fleet into a specific region at a specific time. But numbers and geography are only part of the story. Training, maintenance, and readiness play a huge role in determining real combat power. The United States has a long history of high-intensity air operations. Its pilots typically log more flight hours than their counterparts in most other countries, and its maintenance systems are designed to keep aircraft ready for deployment at all times. It also has extensive combat experience, which shapes its tactics and doctrine. Although the US constantly says it's a peace-loving country, it has been deeply involved in most wars on Earth in the past 200 years. China has been improving rapidly in these areas, but it does not yet have the same level of operational experience, as the country has not been in a war for decades. That does not mean it is weak, it just means it is still catching up in real-world combat. Another major difference is how each country approaches technology integration. The US has spent years building a network where everything is connected: fighters, drones, satellites, and even ground units. It creates a kind of battlefield awareness that is hard to match. China is developing similar capabilities, and in some cases, it is moving very quickly. But building a fully integrated system takes time, especially when it involves coordinating across different branches of the military. There is also the question of sustainability. It is one thing to have a large fleet on paper, and another to keep it running during a prolonged conflict. Such a difference includes everything from spare parts and maintenance crews to fuel supplies and pilot rotations. Iran's resistance in the past weeks has exposed the weakness of the US military, and many are asking the question of whether the US is as potent as it seems, especially when it faces China someday. The US indeed has a global logistics network that supports its operations, but that network can also be a vulnerability if supply lines are disrupted. China's more localized focus could make its supply chains more resilient in a regional conflict, but it also limits its ability to operate far from home. However, Chinese leaders are not interested in fighting other nations thousands of miles away, so it matters little in this regard. Interestingly, both countries are moving in a similar direction regarding the future of air combat. Instead of just building more manned fighter jets, they are investing in new concepts like unmanned wingmen and collaborative combat aircraft. These systems are designed to work alongside traditional fighters, extending their capabilities and reducing risk to human pilots. In this sense, the definition of air power is changing. It is no longer just about how many jets you have, but how those jets interact with a broader ecosystem of technologies. This shift is also reflected in procurement decisions. The US, for example, is planning fewer next-generation fighters compared to earlier programs, focusing instead on quality and integration. China appears to be balancing both, continuing high production while also investing in advanced systems. So where does that leave the balance between China and the United States in 2026? Right now, the United States still holds the edge overall. It has a larger and more experienced force, better global reach, and a more mature network-centric system. But that lead is not as overwhelming as it once was. China is not just catching up, it is doing so in a way that reflects its own strategic priorities. It is building a force that is highly capable within its region, supported by rapid production and increasing technological sophistication. In a way, the competition is no longer about who has the most aircraft. It is about which system works better under real-world conditions. Both sides are trying to answer the following questions. Can we deploy quickly? Can we sustain operations? Can our aircraft communicate and coordinate effectively? Can we adapt to new technologies faster than our opponent? Such questions will define air power in the coming years. And if there is one clear takeaway from all of this, it is that the gap between the United States and China is no longer just about quantity versus quality. Both sides are now competing on both fronts, trying to build more, build better, and integrate everything into a cohesive system. That is what makes this rivalry so important. It is not just a comparison of two air forces. It is a glimpse into the future of how wars might be fought, where information, speed, and coordination matter just as much as the machines themselves. In that sense, 2026 is not the end of the story. It is more like the midpoint of a much bigger transition, where the balance of air power is still being rewritten in real time. In such a short video, it is impossible to cover all points. Please share your opinions in the comments section to enlighten other viewers.